I spend weeks in labs in Michigan, Minnesota, California, and I'm over there. And basically, I'm present while they do the mixed trial process, right? So what you did today, I would be there as a sort of like a observer, but also getting my hands dirty just because I can't get away from the concrete.
Yeah, it's
So
just so
that's
tempting.
Hi, and welcome to this month's episode of Engineering Greatness, an original podcast series produced by the American Concrete Institute. My name is Bruno Fong Martinez, and I work as a concrete engineer at Kiewit in Denver, Colorado. With me today is Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine Lucero. I'm a civil engineer at the Bureau of Reclamation in Denver, Colorado.
Hey, Catherine, thanks for joining me today. Why don't we get started and just talk about our paths into civil engineering? Why don't you go first? What inspired you to study civil engineering?
It's probably the most boring story ever because both of my parents are civil engineers. So it
Wow.
just yeah. Um, my dad is an environmental engineer, and then my mom is more of a structural engineer. So I think even when I was little, I just knew I wanted to be a civil engineer, even though I didn't really know what that meant. So
And you're
um,
from New Mexico?
I grew up in California, but my
Okay.
family's from New Mexico. So yeah. Um, uh, so I made it, I guess, into being a civil engineer. What about you? How'd you get started?
Well, when you said it was going to be boring, I thought it was going to, because it was going to be the same as mine when be based around Legos. I wrote my college essay or my civil engineering essay on Legos, and I really, when I got to college, I kind of realized that everyone wrote their essays about Legos and was like that. But it was more just when I was little. I had a real affinity for seeing progress, gradual progress in say construction is a good example for that. So just seeing something being built little by little, that was something that really appealed to me. And I remember when I was a kid, I went on this field trip and I learned about this sort of hobby of building like a little pyramid out of toothpicks, and it was going to be like this giant pyramid and thousands of toothpicks. And I went home after the trip and I started doing it in my living room or whatever, and quit after maybe a few weeks or something. But it was just that idea of building something piece by piece and let it progress. And that only got magnified with Legos and so on. So a lot of that. My parents were accountants, and I was the opposite. I wanted to stay away from accounting as much as possible. So building stuff seemed kind of fine. I had a cousin who was an architect, and so at first I thought I wanted to be, an architect because that seemed like building, related to building. And then, but it wasn't until later that I realized how art heavy architecture is and really detached from engineering, unfortunately. And I realized that my mindset was also very much engineering focused. I was very process oriented, like step one, two, three, ABC, optimize whatever process you're doing. So when I combined the building side with the engineering mindset, civil engineering was a pretty easy choice, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You talk about trying one thing and it not really working out, and then kind of getting into civil engineering from there. Even within civil engineering, when I was an undergrad, I went to the University of New Mexico and I worked for the USGS there in Albuquerque. And I really thought I wanted to do water resources engineering and, that sort of path. And I I really enjoyed my job there, but once I took that concrete class, I was hooked. So it definitely changed my trajectory kind of in there, but it was still within civil engineering. Um, but I also think it's interesting that you said that the architecture was too artistic or too artsy, I guess, because I think my favorite thing about concrete is that it is kind of creative. There's not just one formulation for a concrete mixture. There's not just a one size fits all for anything with concrete and what it can do architecturally as well. So I think that's kind of a fun part of the job is just kind of having to think kind of creatively in how you approach a problem.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll go into it more detail later, but I describe it as a puzzle. Like concrete to me is a puzzle, and
Mm.
there is a very artistic and in some ways non-scientific side to it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun to explore.
So where did you go to undergrad? I don't think I
So,
know.
and I asked about New Mexico because I remember UNM, and I myself I'm from Las Cruces in New Mexico,
Oh, okay.
but I ended up going to Cornell for undergrad. So that was, and like I don't think anybody goes to undergrad thinking they're going to be a concrete engineer, because I don't think I knew the difference between cement and concrete as an undergrad at Cornell until I took my first concrete class. So I was over there as a civil engineering undergrad. Big move going from New Mexico to upstate New York, but it was there that I took Ken Hover's classes, and so that was just a eye-opening experience, and I could fill the whole podcast hour just talking about him and his influence in his classes. But it was really from him that I got the concrete bug.
Nice. And then after that, you went to UT to Austin.
Yeah. So I started my concrete classes junior year of undergrad, and then I did basically that's when I really, I got the concrete bug. I got this interest, and for the first time in my academic career, I had something that I specifically wanted to pursue. So then I looked for internships that were related to concrete, and that's how it evolved. And once it got time to be a senior and graduate, I had to make this decision of, do I work, do I go to grad school? You probably went through the same, and grad school was a bit of a gamble because unfortunately the timing from when you get grad school decisions doesn't align with the application time for full-time jobs. Full-time jobs are in the fall. Grad school decisions came in the spring. So, it was basically, do I risk, letting go of a job that I can get in the fall in order to maybe go to grad school? But in the end, I decided to do it just because of my interest in concrete, and ended up going to UT. That was a very, very good choice, an easy choice, because my advisor in Texas, Kevin Folliard, got into concrete because of Ken Hover some 30 years ago. So that was an instant connection right there. But
Nice.
yeah, so how about yourself? Being from New Mexico, or being in UNM Albuquerque, and then going all the way to Purdue, how did that happen?
Um, yeah, that was interesting because I think I literally Googled like grad school with materials or like concrete materials.
You found a pretty good one.
Yeah, because I was noticing in my initial search for grad schools, like I knew I wanted to go to grad school.
Yeah.
Um, a
Well,
lot of
when
them,
did you
oh,
know
what?
that though?
Oh, after I took my materials class, like
What
because
what
there was
year were
only
you?
a junior,
Okay.
yeah. So it's like they just have that class, and I knew I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And all
Did
like the
you
senior level classes were more like structural.
did
Yeah.
you ever try to do both, apply to jobs or grad school, or you were all in on grad school?
I was all in on grad school. Yeah,
Okay,
I did an
gotcha.
internship between because I needed something to do for a summer. I didn't want to
Yeah.
just like sit around, but um yeah, so looking for grad schools, I didn't want to do like a purely structural like design. I didn't want to like do structural design.
Mm.
So finding a program that had an emphasis like on cementitious materials, and being like in the civil engineering department and not like in a material science department was like pretty important to me. And yeah, no, I got very fortunate in working with Dr. Jason Weiss at Purdue when he was there, and then I had a great time at Purdue. I learned a lot,
Yeah, I mean, you,
but
you were there in
yeah.
a really, really good time too. I know a
Yeah.
lot of big concrete people were there during that time.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So still have some great lifelong friends. That's when I got introduced to ACI as well. So I think it's coming up on 10 years of being a member, which is like, where does time go? But I think my first convention was to present at one of the research in progress um, sessions at Reno. So that was 2014. And so I think that's
2014.
when I got my
As a
national
grad student?
membership. Yeah, as a grad student.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
I think
and
it was my
in
first year.
in undergrad, were you doing anything concrete related with Professor Taha? Is his name?
Yeah, so he was on sabbatical.
Okay,
I wanted to work in his lab my senior year, but he was on sabbatical my senior year, so he
yeah,
wasn't like hiring any undergrads. So that was kind of a bummer, but no, he was a great professor, and yeah, really was very passionate about concrete, which is where I got it from, I guess. Um, and I my at UNM they didn't really have a whole lot of involvement with ACI. Like they
hmm,
didn't have a student chapter. It's a really small. I think like my graduating class was like 20 people or something like that. It really wasn't like a whole lot of people. Um, and we had an ASCE chapter, so we did the steel bridge, and my senior year we did the concrete canoe. Um, but we certainly weren't very good at it. Like I said, the professor was like on sabbatical, so we were kind of like a little unsupervised when it came to what we were doing, and it was like our first year doing it in I think like 10 years or something like that. Um, so, but it was fun. I mean, kind of getting your hands dirty, like trying to figure out concrete, but
yeah, and
um, yeah.
definitely. I have some experience with that too because I was in Steel Bridge. But before going into that, I was interested in asking. So, given that you knew that you wanted to go to grad school, did you know that you were going just for the master's, or did you have intention of PhD? Did that change along the way?
Yeah, I think that changed several times along the way. At first, I was like, okay, I just want to get my master's and then like start working and then, figure out what I want to do after that. But then after visiting some schools and like really seeing some of the programs and talking to professors and talking to other students, then I was kind of like a little bit more convinced about a PhD. But then I don't know. I was just like, I guess like non-committal or something. It's just like a really long time to like commit to something, like an
Yeah.
indeterminate amount of time. So um, I did like at Purdue they had like the program where you could do masters with an option of PhD. Like you weren't like tied to your
Mhm.
funding wasn't tied to the PhD for this particular fellowship.
Got it.
Um, so I went that route, and then when it came time to um, decide, like for real, like after I defended my
Mhm.
master's thesis, that was when Dr. Weiss was moving to Oregon State.
Oh yeah.
So I guess it just kind of felt like a good time to just kind of like be done. If I was going to make a move somewhere, like where did I want to make a move? Did I want to make a move out here to Denver and start a job, or did I want to like it was definitely a crossroads
Yeah.
there. So uh, that's kind of how that happened. So
Mhm.
um, what about you? Like, were you always kind of
So
wanting a
I
PhD?
so like I said, when I was senior year, I was in between a job and grad school because I was a king of the B minuses in undergrad. I was not a prolific uh, academic. Also, just Cornell was really hard.
Yeah.
So grad school was never in my periphery. My goal was, I got to Cornell from New Mexico. It was a huge deal. I was going to graduate, get a job, and make my mom happy, and that was that. And then I found concrete, and that's when it really upended things. And I had to come to terms with like, okay, do I go with the job, which may or may not involve concrete, or go with grad school? And I did end up having to do a bunch of interviews in the fall of senior year. And I would go to these interviews and say, yeah, I want to work for you and this and that. And I had to reject some job offers, hoping that the grad school thing would work out. But I was also going in just as a master's because it was very gradual, baby steps. Like even going for the master's was a big deal. I wasn't sure about that. So it kind of started out as a master's, but after spending 1 year in Austin and like getting along with my advisor, very enjoying the research, enjoying the lab, enjoying the city, and really not being in any rush to work. All my friends went straight to working, and I was like, "You're working, and you don't like it. Why would I want to do that?" They had a very flexible schedule. So I really enjoyed my time in grad school, and my advisor basically said, you can stay doing the same research project, just extended. Funding is here. The timeline's this. How does it sound? And after a year, I decided that it was a really good plan. And just in general, for any listeners, I would say that my I guess my factors when choosing grad school, I would put number one, the advisor and the research focus. Specifically, like I said, at UT, I worked with Kevin Folliard, who got into Concord because of Ken Hover. So that was an immediate connection, but also the research that he did was very practical focused. Most of the funding came from the local DOT in Texas. So it was very much, how can we make something and implement it in DOT projects that can be used readily. Number two, and you touched on this too, is the specialty of materials. So I only applied to universities that had a subspecialty for materials and didn't just clump it into structural, right? Maybe you did
Yeah,
same
same
thing.
thing. Yep.
And at the very end, when I was choosing a grad school, I was in between, coincidentally, Oregon State and UT. So very small world. And that was before I knew that Jason Wise was moving. Because I also applied to Purdue. But yeah, the few schools that had a concentration of materials that I remember were Texas, Oregon State, Purdue, Illinois. Um, those come to mind. But yeah, that was a priority for me because I knew I was not a structural engineer. I was a material engineer. Other factors, number three is location. Being in Austin was very exciting. Like I said, Corvallis, Oregon would have been like the other side of the country after being from New Mexico and going to Cornell on the East Coast and then going to Oregon on the West Coast. It was pretty far for me. So Texas seemed like a good middle of the road location. And then I would say then the factor number four, which potentially is the biggest one, was funding, right? I had my grad school funded. I believe you did. You had funding as well. So yeah, that was a huge factor for me. Doing combination of TAing and RA.
Yeah. So, I don't think I actually know this, even though we've been friends for a couple of years. When did you graduate and get your PhD?
I did Cornell was 2015, then my master's in Texas 2017, and then PhD 2020 in the middle of the pandemic during really weird times, the summer of 2020, and that's when I started working. So I moved to Denver in the fall of 2020. Yeah, things were kind of weird back then.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a challenge to try to wrap up your dissertation and everything, like when you
It
can't
was it
really.
was so I initially I was scheduled for spring 2020, and then that got pushed because the world shut down. And it was a very interesting time because I was already supposed to be a shut-in because I was supposed to be writing my dissertation, but now it was like forced shut in. So yeah, that was some interesting times, writing the dissertation during quarantine in the let's say, what was it, maybe May, June 2020
Yeah.
timeline. Yeah.
You had no excuses. You had to finish. No
And
other
so
distractions.
you said you did internships during undergrad, and then you did your master's and then started working right away at the bureau.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I worked at the USGS during undergrad. So I was like a student employee. So I did that for 3 years. Uh, and then I actually interned at the Bureau of Reclamation in the concrete lab that I work at now. So I interned there in between my bachelor's and master's. And I thought that was kind of funny because I was just kind of slowly making my way like to Indiana from New Mexico, just kind of going up to Denver and then across. And that was another one of those just kind of random Googling of, concrete labs.
Mhm.
And so, there's all these concrete labs around, kind of in like the Midwest and a lot of other big labs on the coasts. And then there was this big lab in Denver. And so I already worked for the Department of Interior. So I didn't want to do more paperwork. So I thought that would be a good idea. And so I applied for that. Turns out I did have to do more paperwork.
More paperwork.
Yeah, but
Unavoidable.
I know. And then so I did that internship, and then when I was getting close to graduating, I reached out to my former mentor, Katie Bartajay. She's who I worked with.
Yeah.
at Reclamation and asked her if they were hiring or if they were like planning on hiring. And they were, which is nice. But in the government, it takes a really long time from opening up a posting to actually starting a job. Like the whole application process just kind of takes a while. So I
Okay.
got a little bit nervous, because like I applied for it in, I think like April.
Hmm.
I defended in like May
Yeah.
of like that, like a month later. And then I, didn't hear anything for like a couple months. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna
Wow.
be like jobless,
And
like and not have any jobs. Because I had like turned down some other jobs as well.
so
Um,
you were actively applying to others as well?
I wasn't really excited about them. There wasn't really a whole
Yeah.
lot available at that time. There was a lot of structural jobs.
Yeah.
So I applied for some of those, and I was like really hoping, some of the other big labs, that they would have something open, but there was no job postings for that um, at the time that I was applying. But yeah, I got lucky, and so I got, selected for Reclamation. So I didn't start until July, applying in April. Um, so it took a long time, and then I moved out to Denver, and I've been here since 2015, summer of 2015. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, and been here at Reclamation that whole time.
Wow. And
Yeah.
that you touched on something that I saw as well, is that by and large, structural engineering is the big branch of civil. And so the opportunities for concrete materials are, well, first of all, there's just not that many people specializing in it, but there are also not that many opportunities. So I did find it challenging. The more you specialize, that the harder it can be to find a job, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully that changes in future years.
Yeah.
There's some signs of progress, but yeah, hopefully it goes more in that direction as well. Um,
When did oh
yeah, go ahead.
when did you become an ACI national member, in college or after
So
you started
that started
working?
in grad school. My advisor was very proactive with getting his students to attend conventions. So that was a big push. My first one was Denver, fall of 2015, I believe it was. You were probably involved with the hosting.
I was there, yes. It was
and
exciting.
and so that was my first one, and I remember it just being such an eye-opening experience, and like seeing all these people, and seeing the Oregon people that I had just visited. That was a lot of fun. And since then, I've just kind of I got to go a bunch of times for presenting my research, and even now in industry, it's invaluable, the networking. In fact, I met my boss for my current job at an ACI convention in Vegas 2018. And I met him there, and I talked to him, and that's how this job kind of came about. So yeah, so the networking aspect has been huge. At Texas, I was involved in a sort of revival of the student chapter of ACI. That was very successful for a few years. We brought many undergrads to compete in the student competitions. That was probably one of the highlights of my grad school career. And then in I was also involved with the local Central Texas chapter. And now that I'm in Denver, I've become involved with the Rocky Mountain chapter, and recently joined the board of directors for the local chapter. So yeah, ACI everywhere. And I know likewise for you, right? When were you president of
Yeah.
the Rocky Mountain chapter?
Oh, I think I was the president in like 2021. So I didn't really have to do anything. I just had to host some virtual things. It was not
Uh,
not really a normal time to be a president of something, but
mhm.
um I mean, I think that's also like kind of a testament to how important it is to be involved with your local chapter, though, is um you might not always have the opportunity to go to convention every single year
That's
or twice a
true. Yeah.
year, whatever it is, but um, you still get to network and connect with people in the local chapter. And I think being involved in the local chapter has really helped grow my network. And like, you can always kind of like know someone, or someone would know someone who's in the chapter who you could talk to
Yeah.
about
And it
something.
helps
So
it helps having those connections locally, because people at national convention, maybe you see them twice a year, whereas the local chapter, maybe you see them once a month. So
right, yeah.
makes a difference.
And they have a good idea of like what is going on in the local just like community of concrete, like what kind of materials do we have available here? Whereas like, if we talk to someone from ACI National, they might have a different experience with like a certain issue or something like that. Like, so yeah, I after being president of the Rocky Mountain chapter of ACI, I continued to be involved with that. And so whether it's on committees or otherwise, just kind of going to meetings, but I would like to prioritize that a little bit more as well. So.
Gotcha. And so what kind of interesting things are you seeing at work? Do you get involved in much research specific things?
Yeah, so we do some research here at the labs. And then we also do a lot of like project work, write a lot of concrete specifications for new construction. But I think kind of the same with everyone. Just like the lack of availability of fly ash is still kind of like hitting a lot of places, and some regions are more affected by it than others. And so reclamation works in the Western United States. So we definitely see more natural pozzolans being submitted for acceptance. And so we've been doing like some research, just like seeing how those materials perform long term, things like that. So yeah, and then like right now, a lot of modifications to dams and other like water infrastructures to try to increase capacity. So, some reservoir enlargements, raising a dam or something like that. So some really interesting opportunities to get to do some very unique testing.
So can you walk me through like your typical day, work day?
Yeah, I feel like every day is different. So let's see what today was. Today was a lab day. So we were doing some concrete trial batches for a project. They're doing a modification to a dam, and they have a lot of like mass concrete. And so we're doing like a government furnished mixture. So we have some mixes that have 1.5-inch concrete, maximum size aggregate concrete, and some with 3-inch maximum size aggregate. So today did some trial batches for that, and then did some reporting and stuff on the computer, and then now I'm here. So there is definitely a big mix of being in the lab. I do like to have hands-on, like
Nice.
run my own tests. I like to do that, even though I maybe should delegate a little bit more, but yeah. So I think that's one of my favorite parts about the job, is that I kind of have control over like what I get to do. I'm not just like always in front of the computer only looking at the data, but I get to actually make concrete and mortar and all that kind of stuff on a regular basis. So.
Yeah, it's like you never left grad school.
It is like I never left grad school, because if I get paid more, so so it is nice. It's nicer that way. Yeah. So what do you do at Kiewit?
So I would say that I would describe our role as like a concrete wizard would be the simplest way to describe it. Kiewit's a general contractor with operations across North America and lots of construction projects, and they all use concrete to some extent. And so they come to us with any questions. Ideally they come to us early, and we can sort of plan proactively for any major risks related to concrete. Sometimes it's more reactive, if like something already went wrong, and it's now we're the fire department and we have to put out all these fires. So there's a lot of variety in those terms of what we do, because it could encompass anything. For the most part, concrete is pretty sturdy. So most of the time it comes out right. It hits 3,000, 4,000 psi. But we really get involved when things get a little more interesting. When you didn't get the strength you wanted. The concrete got too hot. It got too cold. It didn't set, or it set too fast. The cover's too low, too high. There's cracking here, this or that. A lot of that is pretty interesting what we do. And so in some ways I like it, because it's very dynamic. There's kind of like a detective work part to it, part detective, part wizard. And, the projects come to us trying to solve their problems, and we kind of have to figure out, what's available, how do we fix it, and so on. So yeah, some of that.
That's cool. Are you on site a lot or?
I go to site, I visit concrete labs, and that's how I get my fix of concrete labs. Typically I go to these industry labs because we don't have our own lab. But I spend weeks in labs in Michigan, Minnesota, California, and I'm over there, and basically I'm present while they do the mixed trial process, right? So what you did today, I would be there as a sort of like a observer, but also getting my hands dirty just because I can't get away from the concrete.
Yeah, it's
So
just so
that's
tempting. You gotta
it
get your
is, it
shovel
is.
and
And it's well, the best part, especially coming from an academic background, is that I go to a lab, I spend a week there, and then somebody else does the testing, somebody else does the reporting. And so I just get an abundance of data, right? I get test reports and then I do the analysis, but I don't get bogged down by the actual test, which I'm sure is pretty time consuming. Someone's gotta break the cylinder, someone's gotta measure the motor bars or whatever, and all that takes quite a bit of time. So Catherine, what are some of the challenges you faced in your time in industry, and based on that, what would be your advice to other young professionals coming into the industry?
I think one of the challenges I faced when I first started my career was I think I expected myself to know everything already. I just came out of school where you learn a bunch and you think you kind of like know stuff. Um, and I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to just kind of like learn more, like know everything and all that kind of stuff. And now looking back on it, like I've learned so much in the past 8 years. Like there's no way that could have been condensed to like a 2 years master's, right? So like give yourself time. Like you're learning every single day and just like absorb and learn and reach out to other people to learn new things. You know, you're not going to know everything overnight. And you'll learn from experience because, something will go wrong one time and you'll remember it. And so, yeah, I think that's my advice is just to kind of try to absorb and learn every single day. It's kind of
Yeah,
it.
no, I agree. I think that's key. I think it's key to acknowledge what you don't know and try to learn about it, right? Because yeah, I think there's a lot of people going to, maybe they get forced into fields that they're not familiar with, and then they pretend to know what they do, and it's like, no, it's okay to say I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
Yeah. And yeah, what about you? What about your challenges you faced and
Yeah,
how
so
you
I
overcome
think
it?
for me, something that's, it's still a ongoing learning experience is just the resistance that I face in challenging the status quo. I came out of school, with, bright eyes and hopes of changing the world and all of that, and then you get hit by the wall of reality of like, this is the way construction is, this is the way concrete is. And especially again with the engineering mindset, I always want to optimize things. And there's in engineering, there's multiple ways to reach an optimal design, but you always want to improve. And that's really not the way that the industry set up. The industry set up is just the way that somebody wrote it 30, 40 years ago, and nobody has wanted to change it ever since because they don't want to take the liability. So I've faced a lot of resistance because I always want to ask and challenge, like, why do we do it this way? Can we do it better? Why is this requirement here? Why is this limitation here? And there's a lot of resistance to any kind of change. So I'm learning to pick my battles because I just can't win everything, but I'm trying to change little by little and sort of exist in this realm of academic and industry worlds. So my advice to young professionals would be first, find your concrete. So for myself and maybe for you, Catherine, I think concrete is going to be the rest of my professional career, my focus in one way or another. So I really, I would encourage any students to find what they're passionate about, be it concrete or something else. That's something that try to help undergrads when I was mentoring them through the ACI student chapter. And, I didn't expect them to go into concrete specifically, but was hoping that they would find, their interest in their respective area. So yeah, find your concrete and challenge everything, because like I said, we got engineering to improve things. So it doesn't have to be the way that it is. It's just little by little, small victories.
Yeah, that's great advice to anyone. Find something that you're passionate about and stick with it. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening to this month's episode of Engineering Greatness. Join us each month as ACI pairs together young professionals in the concrete industry to engage in intimate conversations about their life and work. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And for more information on the American Concrete Institute, visit us online at concrete.org, and we'll see you next time.